Alright, welcome back everyone. Today I'll be doing a video for replacing the front brakes, which will include the rotors, pads, the inner and outer bearings, the oil seal on the front brakes of the 91. The process for doing that is pretty much identical to this truck as to the 88 or the 85 Blazer. It stayed pretty much the same throughout the years as far as the square body 7th generation goes. So we'll go ahead and get started. Now I've already got the wheel loose, and then I jacked it up. I always like to put a floor jack under it. I leave it under there as well, but then of course I also put a jack stand under it, especially when if you're not doing it on concrete, you don't have a shop to put it in or something like that. It's always a good idea to have a couple of things holding it in place. You should always do that anyway, but especially on ground and when it's soft, because it could sink in one corner and cause it to tip. If your floor jack, sinks down after a while. One thing I like to do before you loosen your wheel all the way up, you can just snug up a couple of lug nuts back up, finger tight, and grab a hold of your wheel top and bottom, and then push and pull back and forth, and see if you feel any movement. And then go to side. Side to side will check looseness in your tie rods and stuff like that. And up and down usually will be where you'll feel wheel bearing play or upper or lower ball joint play. If you have a really loose click evenly back up and down, it's usually wheel bearing. But if you can feel just like if only you push like this and you feel it go forward and then back, but you can't pull it this way and do it the other way, usually that's one of your ball joints. Alright, so that's just a quick check. I try to do it every time I jack up a vehicle just to make sure there's nothing getting loose in the front suspension. Alright, so then of course once you've checked that, just take all your lug nuts off. Now what I usually do is once I pull my wheel off, I'll just set it right down in here in front of it. It makes a pretty good chair you can sit in or on to, oh, you're not sitting on the ground, and it puts you up a little bit higher. Alright, now the main reason I'm doing this today is I know I have still some pad left, but the rotors are definitely warped on it. If you have to hit the brakes, a little bit more than normal, a little bit harder, somebody pulls out in front of you or something like that, whatever it is, it tends to shake pretty bad. So I know the rotors are warped, and it looks like actually my pads are getting down pretty low anyway, so I figured I'd go ahead and take care of the whole thing at one time and show you guys how to take care of those. Alright, when you're doing this kind of work, it's always a good idea to get some disposable gloves like this. It just keeps your hands clean, so if you need to stop to answer the phone or whatever, or get something out of the vehicle, you don't want to get fingerprints inside the car. And then we'll also be spraying some cleaner and dealing with wheel bearing grease, and it's just better to keep the chemicals and stuff off your hands. It's definitely worth it. And this is another nice thing to have, especially if you're working outside. Is get your cardboard box, break it down, lay it on the ground, or some plastic, even rags. It just makes it easier to keep track of your parts. You should always lay your parts out in the order you took them off. That way you can remember how to put them back on, as well as you can put your tools on them. So we're going to go ahead and get started here. So the first thing you're going to need to do is take your 2 slide pin bolts out. Alright, and for that you're going to need a 3/8 hex, or sometimes referred to Allen heads. And just put it on there. If it doesn't go in there really good, you might want to tap it. This one seems to be going in fine, but alright. Pop that loose. I like to leave it in a little ways until you get the other one loose so it's not moving around. If your hose is getting in your way, you may have to use an actual Allen wrench and not a socket and ratchet, because the elbow is usually shorter distance. It's a pretty tight fit, so, and sometimes it makes it easier to put that on first, then slide. So on the top one here, I'm gonna have to use a wrench, an Allen wrench instead, because like I said, the distance here is shorter than the socket and the ratchet on it. They make longer ones, which would definitely make it a lot easier, but there's a couple things you can do. Once you get it in there, you can either take maybe a short piece of pipe or something to put on it to give yourself some more leverage, or you can use a hammer and tap it. Just don't hit your fingers. And there we go. Once you get it unthreaded a little bit, you may have to actually put some tension on it as well. You can either pull on it with your other hand, or if you have to, take a flat screwdriver and put up against the edge and kind of put some backward pressure on it, and then it'll just come loose. Put that in there. Alright, then you should be able to just pull your caliper up. Usually it's easier to pull it from the bottom and slide up off there. And now you can get a closer look at your old pads. And one thing to look for, which you can see in these really bad, you can see all these heat cracks. Now it's technically not a big deal if they're not all the way through, but you really can't tell when they're in the middle like this. If you have a crack run into the edge here and you can see it come all the way down, then eventually it's going to probably break it completely off. You can also see that it's a lot thicker at this end than it is here. So when it was breaking, one side wasn't getting the same amount of pressure as the other one. Usually that comes down to, especially on these, the slide pin bolts. You can see it's got a lot of junk on it. So you definitely want to clean these up and grease them, and I'll go over that more when we go to put it back together. Alright, you can also see that the heat caused the glue that holds these little shims that's already popped loose. And these pads are only about 2 years old, but I drive this truck pretty much every day, and so it gets a lot of stop and go too. A lot of stop and go. There's not any really highway driving on it, so. Alright, and also see this one's even worse. It's still a lot thicker than the other one as well. But again, you can see that it's wearing crooked. It's definitely a lot thinner up here than it is down here. Down here it's almost just as thick as it would be brand new. And it's also got a lot of heat cracks in it. And that one, I don't know if you can see it in this light, but it looks like this one may have been cracking all the way down to the backing plate. Alright, so once you got that out, you can just set your caliper somewhere where it's not hanging on its hose. You don't want it to be the weight of the caliper being on that, so you can stick it over on your leaf spring or over on this side, up here, just wherever it's out of your way, and that it's not hanging on its hose. So here comes the part where you'll be doing your rotor. So what you're going to do is you're going to have another Allen head. This is a number 4, looks like. So you got 6 screws. Now this is a manual locking hub. Normally when they were brand new, they came with what they called automatic locking hubs. But a lot of times those would go bad, and you'd get, in my Blazer, when I knew one of them was going bad, I believe it was the passenger side. It would be fine until you were coming to a stop, and once you got down to about 5 miles an hour, a little bit less, right before you would stop, the truck would just slam really hard. It would feel and sound like you hit something on that side. And it was the automatic locking hub, I guess. It was engaging or disengaging. It was some kind of problem, and I didn't really dive into it too far. I just pulled them off and put manual locking hubs. Some people put them on here too to help with gas mileage. It's supposed to make some amount of difference. I don't really know how much difference it truly makes, but basically your actual axle here would be spinning all the time when you're going down the road with automatic, because all you'd have to do in order to get four-wheel drive is you could be going down the road and just push your lever from two-wheel drive to four-wheel drive, and you'd have four-wheel drive. Now with the manual locking hub, you actually have to get out and turn this from free to lock. And now when I turn this, you'll see it locks in that axle. So if you were in a situation where you're already stuck, hopefully you can still get to your front wheels, because you got to come out and do this. Otherwise, putting it in four-wheel drive in the vehicle is not going to do anything. It's not going to, all it's going to do is put power through your drive shaft, and that's it. Whereas again, with the automatic locking hub, all you'd have to do is throw the shifter and it would actually put power to your drive shaft, and these were already locked in. So sometimes it's better just go ahead and lock these in, and then you could do the same thing. Then your axles would be already spinning and locked in, and all you'd have to do, if you did get in a situation where you need it, you could just put your shifter in. But some people think that because you have a manual locking hub and the only thing that's spinning is just your hub here, your rotor, and the axle's not spinning, that little bit of extra drag from your two axle shafts spinning is going to decrease your gas mileage. Again, I don't really know how much it really makes a difference, and it doesn't really bother me either way. It can make it a little bit quieter. I've noticed, at least in this truck, if I have the hubs locked and in two-wheel drive going down the highway or down the road, you get a little bit more noise and a little bit more vibration. So I think I like that more than I do care about the gas mileage part of it. To be honest, if you're driving a vehicle like this, you're probably not too concerned about gas mileage anyway, to be honest. So some of these can get a little stuck. Just kind of tap them a little bit, and there you go. Hopefully they don't fly off too far. And then put them down, and then just pop all 6 of them out, and it would be basically the exact same situation with the automatic. If you do still have automatic locking hubs, it has the same basic setup. All of them are different. I don't even know what brand these are that were on it when I bought the vehicle. I think I have mile marker locking hubs on my Blazer. Warren makes a kind for them. There's probably multiple companies that make these, and they're all going to be probably slightly different, but it's the same basic principle. You're going to have probably an Allen head screw, probably about 6 of them holding a cap on, and then once we get inside, I'll show you what's going on with the parts on the inside. Alright, now you notice when you're taking it loose, it's got some spring behind it. It's not real strong, but you may want to have 2 hands on it here just to hold it. You don't want it to pop out and land on the ground. You really don't want this stuff to pick up a bunch of trash. Then you have to clean stuff off of it. So there you got your screws. And you see, once it gets about this far, it doesn't have any spring on it anymore. So here's basically the back side of your switch. And you'll have a little rubber seal generally around this as well. It's kind of hard to see this one. It's got junk all over it, but grease all over it. Just kind of set everything in a line. Alright, so hopefully y'all be able to see this. It's going to be a little bit interesting, but get this ring out, what you're going to want to do is get a flathead screwdriver up under the edge of it and try to pull it up. And what you can also do
because it's going to want to spin. You can spin this out of your way too. Try to hold it in place with one, pick it up, and then snake the other one underneath. Once you get it out of there a little bit, it's pretty easy. Once you get something behind it, you can just spin around the hub and it'll pop out. So you're just going to lay that aside. And you can see how quickly trash picks up if you drop it, because I just dropped that a little bit on the edge there and there's a bunch of junk on it, so we'll have to clean that off before we put it back. Now once that's loose, I'm going to take a pair of snap ring pliers to take that snap ring out. So once you get it out a little bit, and these are unfortunately a cheap pair of snap ring pliers, I forgot to bring my good ones, but if you can get it to come loose a little bit up out of the ring, take a screwdriver and kind of pull it. Sometimes it'll pop right out of there. There we go. Just lay that there. Now, you have to mess around with it a little bit to get it to come out. Yeah. And I believe that this is one of the more aggravating styles. There we go. Once that comes out, your spring push it out. So you're going to want to keep, again, these parts as ordered as possible. Just pull your spring out. Just set it aside. Alright. Okay, once you get all that out, if you look in there, you can see your axle nuts. So what you'll need to do is you'll have this socket here. I got this one Advanced. Advanced Auto Parts. Autocraft. It doesn't really have a number on it though. But if you go in there and look them up, or I'm sure the guys there can look it up and tell you which one's the right one. Basically, it's, you got 4 square pieces here though in equal spots. It's probably the only one like that, but you might want to just make sure. If I had the part number, if I can find the part number for it, I'll put it in the description below. That way you'll know it's the right one. So you're just gonna take it and just spin it, and you'll feel it lock in pretty quickly. And just take a 1/2 inch ratchet. It does move around though, so you're gonna really have to steady it with your hand and try to break it loose. But luckily, because it's on the spindle and not in the hub part of it, you don't have to worry about it spinning. So it is a little bit of a pain, even when you have the proper tools for it. So your first one is going to be really tight, should be. And just slide that out of there, put it over on the side. And you look, you'll have a little ring in here. You should be able to just take your finger or a small screwdriver and just kind of pull on it back and forth. Eventually it's just grease that's keeping it stuck to your second axle nut. There we go. You'll see it's got these little holes, and there's a little spot on your inner nut, has a pin, and it just, you need it to line up with one of these so it sits flush. Now your inner one's not going to be tight. It should not be tight. So, see, no pressure on it. That's the one that sets the preload on your bearing. You really want to do that in the correct manner. Otherwise, if you put it too tight, you'll burn up your bearings. If you have it too loose, then you're going to have bearing play. So, just spin that one out. And there's that little pin. So it's kind of good because you'll know that this is your inner nut, and you'll know which way it goes. You don't want to put it that way, obviously. And then again, I would set it in order. So you're starting out with your caliper bolts, and then taking that loose, your cap, that snap ring, or whatever you want to call it. The other ring there, your hub parts, and then the axle nuts. Once that's done, your hub is loose, and your rotor. It'll come off in one piece. You might have to kind of pull it back and forth because the seal on the back side. There we go. And there it is. And there, I screwed up right there. I've got that your outer bearing is going to fall out. So there's your outer wheel bearing. See, the grease is pretty dark. Just set that aside. Alright, and then we'll get into replacing the rotor. And that's probably the most difficult part of the whole job. Alright, so you'll see that your inner bearing is captured between the hub. It can't go forward, and it can't come back because of your oil seal, or your really a grease seal here. And you can also maybe notice that the seal wasn't installed perfect. There's a gap here between the seal and the edge of the hub, but over here it's actually above it. It actually drops down from the seal to the hub. It's a little crooked. Alright guys, so now that you've got the rotor off the vehicle, you're going to want to remove your inner bearing. You can just lay it over onto the floor, and hopefully you can see down in here. What you want to do is take a piece of just mild steel rod or something like that. You could use an extension, like a half inch extension, 3/8 extension, but you'd probably be messing up the end. So if you do use that, you're probably going to want to have one that you don't plan on actually putting a socket on. But you're going to set this on the inner race here of your bearing and just smack it with a hammer, and then switch sides. So you're going to want to come over from this side, do the same thing, and about 2 few hits will pull it out of there. Alright, so once you get your bearing out, you'll see the ring, or the spring that goes around the seal, that was actually broken in this. It goes in behind your seal here, and it squeezes on the seal to put tension on it, make sure it holds tight around your hub or around your spindle. But don't worry about getting these dirty because we're replacing these. But if you weren't going to replace these, just put a towel down so when you're knocking it out of there, it won't get dirty. And you can reuse these. There's really no reason to replace them unless what you want to do is clean this up really good with some brake clean, or if you have a parts washer, that'd be really nice. You clean it off really good and look at your rollers and spin it so you can see all the surface of the roller. Make sure you don't see any really dull looking areas. It should be shiny, so you don't want to see any dull spots or pits in it. If you see pitting, you need to get rid of them, because they're just gonna, once it gets to that point, it's just gonna take off really bad and wear out quickly. So once you get that out, you'll want to get your races out. If you're replacing your bearings anyway. If you're not replacing your bearings, you don't need to take the races out. So just want to take a rag and get in there and get some of that really old grease out. And regardless whether you're replacing their bearings or not, though, you're going to want to clean all the old grease out of it, especially if it looks like this. I mean, this stuff is really dark. I mean, it's possible that it was a dark colored grease anyway. You can get different kinds of grease. Some of it's, you know, yellowish, some of it's blue. It depends on what brand or whatever, but it's always a good idea to get all the old grease out of here. Okay. Now, in order to get your races for your bearings out, what you're going to do is, whichever one you're taking out first, doesn't matter, but right now I've got it with the front of the rotor facing down, so we're going to be taking the front race out first. You're just going to reach in here and you'll feel a lip, and if you pass that lip, you'll feel the angle of your race. So again, what you're going to do, and then these are a little bit more difficult, but what you're going to do, same thing as with knocking out the bearing and the seal. Take your pin here, get a hold of one of the edges really good, and angle it pretty severely, and then just smack it once, and then switch sides. You'll get used to the noise, and you're not, if you're not doing you're replacing your bearings, you don't have to worry about doing this. You can leave your races in and just flip it over, and there's your race. So in order to do the other one, just flip the other way and reach in there, and you'll feel it down there. Just do the same thing, just reach down in there. Switch sides. And it's about to come out already. Just tap back and forth. And there you go. And there's your other race. They're two different sizes, so you don't have to worry about getting them mixed up. If you're worried about getting the right parts, if you have another vehicle, you can get down to this part, take these races out, and then go to a parts store. It's a little bit, you know, maybe a little bit more time, and you might not have access to another vehicle, but if you do, then you can take these in and they can cross-reference. Even if it's not the same brand as what they carry, they should be able to cross-reference it with these numbers. I'm not even sure what brand. This might be National, but they'll always have the part number somewhere along the ring here on both of them. Alright. Well, you know, I go and say that. Yeah, but as you can also see, they get taken off. It says Germany actually on it, but I can't hardly read the part numbers on them. That means it's been in there a long time. Probably. Alright. So now that your races are out of it, the only thing left you have to do is to actually take the rotor itself off. That's probably the most difficult part of this, and it's pretty much, in my opinion, required to have a bearing press to do this. Hub's a little rough. So what happens is that
your wheel stud here has actually got a spline, and they go in from the back side, so they're pinching the rotor to your hub. Your hub is what has the spline in it. So your stud here has a spline about right here. So you pass through and it presses into this, squeezing the rotor to the hub. So what you have to do is you have to press out your studs to replace the rotor. Not the greatest design, but anyway. So what you're going to do, you're going to set it up here on a bearing press and center it on each stud. Now you can just press this against the stud because it's a solid pressure, so you don't have to worry about it messing up the threads. But if you try to do it with a hammer, if you hit these with a hammer, it's going to smash it down and it's going to mess them up. Some people, you know, put a nut on this and put it flush, so really you're hitting the nut instead of this, so you're trying to even it out anyway. But I still wouldn't suggest that. If you don't have access to, if you don't have a bearing press, you can't afford to buy one, you don't know anybody that has one, you can, again, if you have access to another vehicle, you could take this off like this and take it to a shop, and generally they will press out these for you and then press the new. Alright, it's a good idea you can take a little penetrating oil, spray around it, each one, go ahead and let it soak. Obviously the longer you leave this stuff set, the better, but I'm just going to spray it on there and go ahead and see if we can get these out. Also, you notice I had to use a little socket here. It's a 1/4 inch socket just to give me some extra pushing space, because if you just try to use this, it would come down onto the hub before it would actually press the thing out. But aside from me dropping the set on the concrete and picking up concrete in it, the studs are fine. So I did it this way because this small end lines up with that without getting close to the threads. And they're not a real tight fit when you have a press, but I still would not suggest taking a hammer to it. And it's up to you, but I tried doing that honestly myself and it did not work out so well. So just want to get it lined up. Once you get a little bit of tension on it, take your hand away and you'll see it goes pretty easy. There you go, no damage. So you're just going to do this on every one, and then your rotor will come loose. Alright, there you go. You got all of them out. And you see I'm breaking my own rules here. I don't have gloves on. I've been changing in and out of gloves so many times, but this is just a little bit of dust and a tiny bit of penetrating oil. But again, it's always best to have gloves on and everything. Protect your skin from chemicals and stuff. But sometimes it just you forget about it. Alright, now that that's done, it's still going to be pretty tight. So what you're going to do, set this down and just give it a few taps, and you see that one actually came loose really easy. And there you go. And there's your rotor. And there's your better look at the hub. So your inner race sits here. Alright, now here's the part that you definitely want to wear gloves. What I usually do is take a drain pan or something, take some brake clean, it's basically empty, and just spray it in there and it'll break up that grease, so it's easier to wipe it out of there. You really can't get this stuff too clean. You really want this stuff to not have any debris in it. I mean, look at that, some nasty stuff. But brake clean is a very nasty chemical. Well, it's multiple chemicals, but it if you get it on your skin, it will suck the moisture right out of your skin. If you're exposed to it too long, it'll start to burn. It's just really nasty. So it's always best to try to keep that off your skin. And you don't want to use it in a real closed space either. Obviously, you got a big door and wind and everything. So you don't want to use this in the house or something. If you notice, it looks like somebody was, you can see where it's been hit right there multiple times. There's actually some dings in where the race sits. So somebody replaced something in these and they didn't know what they were doing. That's another thing about the way I showed you to take out your races, and the way I'll show you to put them in, is you're not going to be hitting, you shouldn't be hitting anything but what you're taking loose. And there shouldn't be any reason for all those gouges in it. I don't know what they were trying to do, but it wasn't the right thing. Alright, so once you get that done, cleaned up pretty good, take a rag or something, set this down, and we'll install the new races. So I got the front facing up right now. Take this out. And this is your outer bearing. These are the DriveWorks bearings from Advanced Auto Parts. It comes with the bearing and the race. And also, if you want to see the part number, this is the part number. I looked it up because actually the axle's in the 91 Suburban, which I'm working on today. The axle's out of it actually supposed to be out of an 84 pickup truck. The guy that had it before me did that because one of them rear bearing went bad and the front had a broken axle shaft. So instead of replacing the bearing and an axle, he for some reason replaced both housings and everything. But I cross-referenced it, looked it up through Advance, and it says that these bearings are the exact same from to at least the 84 pickup truck, like a 1500 pickup four-wheel drive pickup truck, to the 91 Suburban four-wheel drive. Same bearings. Like I said, there's very little difference, if any, between the years, at least down to 84. I think once you got a little bit lower than that, there was times when the front axle at least was a Dana instead of a GM 10 bolt. But if it's a GM 10 bolt axle and it's in, you know, whether it's a Suburban or a Blazer or a pickup truck, it should be the same. Even the vans, but of course they're probably not going to have four-wheel drive. But I believe some of them actually did. But at least between the pickup trucks and the Suburban and Blazers, it's the same axles. So that number right there, this is the DriveWorks, again, part number SA35. I think the Timken or National bearing is an A35. And then I'll show you the other ones, the inner bearing number here in a little bit. And again, here's an actual race part number, LM501310. You can also look it up that way and just buy the race separately, especially from places like Napa Auto Parts. I know they can look that up very easily. So in order to put this in, again, you see the down here, there's that lip there. That is where your race is going to stop. They have a little bit of oil on them to keep them from rusting, I think. But you can either take a little bit of penetrating oil and wipe on there, or a little bit of bearing grease
to get a little oily. It'll help go in a little bit. Just set it in there. Try to snug it a little bit with your fingers. The very first part of this is probably the hardest part, and that's to get it to actually start to seat into the hub. Once it gets in there a little ways, it's easy. So you're going to do the same thing as how you took it out. Just of course, when you're putting new parts in, be a little bit more cautious with keeping everything clean. But you're going to do the same thing. You're going to reach in, and you got to be careful not to set it on this lip, but the actual lip of the race. Okay? So we just set it in on the edge of it, and starting out, just tap it pretty lightly. And then go to your other side. It's sometimes difficult to get just on the edge of that race. You can see on this side it's already dropped down some. And basically you want to keep it even side to side. You don't want it to get crooked. Once you know it's in there a little ways, you can hit it harder. You do not have to worry about messing up the race. The race is a very, very hard metal, and you're not going to hurt it. You can hit it straight with this hammer and it would not hurt it. You'll start to get a more solid sounding hit. You'll know when you're hitting it good. If you have a piece like this and it's starting to be pretty banged up, you might want to take it to a grinder or cut off wheel or something and flatten this back out. Clean up all this lipped metal off of it so you get a good 90-degree edge here. That's what makes it harder in this situation, as this one's pretty worn out. And again, the more of the angle you do it at, the better, but the less downward force you're going to have on the race. Alright, so now we're going to open up the rotors. I got AC Delco rotors on Amazon. There's the part numbers if you want to see them. Alright. And of course, one thing you always want to do when you get parts like this, take them over to your old one. Make sure your hubs are the same size, these are the same height, everything like that. Looks good. But so now we're going to go ahead and press the studs back in with the new rotor. So, take the rotor here. Set it on there, and it's a new rotor, so it fits on there really nice. Alright, so we're just going to do the same thing, except we'll have it the other way around like this, and you're going to have to, if you're the one doing the pressing, you're going to have to drop your press down probably 1 notch, maybe 2, depending on. Alright, there we go, that's perfect. And then just do it one at a time, and then you can press directly on the just the back of the stud, and it's not a problem. Stick one in. There we go. Got two in there, kind of helps make sure it's lined up. And then just set it like this. Now, you'll see that it's not perfectly lined up, but it should be okay. But what's going to happen is when you start pressing, it's going to start lifting this up. So what you're going to have to do is take some kind of socket or piece of metal that will fit nicely between the rotor and the bracket here, and that will keep it from twisting too much. Okay. And there's one. Alright. If you wanted to go back around again, another circle, and you can double check, that's fine. I'm not going to really bother. Also, when you put your wheel back on and draw it up, draw your lug nuts up, it's going to squeeze it even harder, and that's going to, you know, pull it. So, but basically you're done. The only other part we got to do before we put it back on the vehicle is, again, probably some people's least favorite part, which is going to be packing grease into your front bearing, or your inner bearing rather, and then putting your seal in. So I'm just going to set this up here for right now, and we'll do our bearing. Alright, so this is your inner bearing. There's the national bearings part number for the inner bearing. The only difference, at least at Advance, your DriveWorks part is just going to have an S. So it's going to be S-LM104949. And these come separate. The outer bearing from DriveWorks comes with the bearing and the race into one box. The national ones, for the outer ones, come separate. You want to just take this, double check its fit. And then the fun part. So open up a can of grease and yeah. Pop it open. And see, this is a really dark grease. So that may have been what was in there before. It so what you're going to do is just take a small little handful, put it in the palm of your hand as best you can, take your bearing and just drag it through edge of it. See how it's pressing it in there? You're going to want to do that until you see the grease coming up between each bearing on the other side. And sometimes you can take your finger and take the excess that's going inside instead of in the... But you can see it doesn't take very long. It's already pressed through. So you just want to do that all the way around. Doesn't take a lot, even on the larger bearings. So you don't want to take a huge handful of that grease out, and then you can always grab more, but And it's a pain if you have a ton. You gotta try to scrape it back in there. So that's pretty good right there. They make tools for this too. It's not gonna really make it a whole lot much cleaner. Just if you're gonna be doing a job like this, just be prepared to get, you know, a little dirty. Now what I like to do before I put this in, set it somewhere clean. And if you look in here, this dead space between the race there and this race, I like to take some grease and smear in there. And just make sure that you have plenty in there. I like to make it feel like it's almost a flat surface rather than dipping in all the way around. And it just ensures that there's going to be plenty of grease in there for the bearings. And it's not just going to fling what you've pressed in there into that middle section and then not have any grease left in the bearing. So there you go. You don't have to have a ton in there, but, and then you can wipe some around the race here. You're going to drop your bearing in. There you go. And you'll see this slight line there above the race. That's where your seal is going to hit. It's very small. You can catch it with your fingernail. Make sure you can hear that. You can catch it with your fingernail. That's where your race is going to sit. And try not to get grease on your rotor like that. Alright. The other reason to wear gloves, you can't really get all this stuff off of here, so once you've done that, just grab your edge here if you can. Hard to do. And peel it off, and then you can do the same thing with that one. Alright. Now we're ready to put the seal in. Seal, DriveWorks seal number right there. Alright, so basically what you're going to do is press this into there, which you can see the difference in the depth, and that's why that seal was sitting crooked in there. Somebody didn't press it all the way in, or it was in there and when I pulled it off the hub, it may have pulled the seal out. These don't fit in there real tight, but there's your spring that I was talking about earlier. You're always going to want to put your spring towards what you're trying to keep in. That's what I was always told. And basically, so your flat metal part is going to be facing outwards like this. Now, you've already got some grease on there, so that'll help it slide in there. But these are pretty thin. They seem kind of strong, but if you go hitting in one spot, it's going to bend it. It's going to mess it up. You're not going to have a proper seal here. You'll probably leak. It's not as big a deal with the grease bearings as it is with oil bearings. If you have a slight imperfection in the seal, or you crushed it a little bit on an oil seal, you're going to leak all your oil out in no time. So what you want to do is find something that fits all the way around on this. And there's a slight possibility your old race works actually perfect for these. That won't always happen, of course, but if this doesn't work, your race doesn't fit on it properly or something like that, you can do a big socket, like possibly the socket that you use to take your axle nut loose might fit. A piece of pipe, as long as it's something that will hit the metal part of your seal consistently all the way around it, with not being too big to where it's going to pop over the edge this way, or be too small where you might get it like this and it hits your rubber piece here. You want something that'll sit, and actually this will probably work even better this way. So then you've got all that surface all the way around to press evenly, as even as possible on that. So, bring this back down on the ground here. Alright, we can sit this down there. And again, you can probably move it around a little bit and feel it kind of get centered on there. Now, I'm not going to hit it like this. I'm going to hit it like this. So it's side to side. It's always going to go crooked. I don't think it's possible to get a seal to go straight in to begin with, but just tap it. And you can see it went really crooked and too far. pull it back out. So even that was, and that was a pretty light hit, but it still was too much force. And you can see it's sitting crooked now, but I'm going to try to, you can do it with a very light tap. Okay. Just sit in there and try to get it even, like that. It's hard to keep them perfectly flat, but if you're a little bit off, you can take and tap slightly, and you see it lifted sideways. And then just try to, obviously it's easier if you had something longer to sit on there, but just tap it very lightly, and then check every time you hit to see which side is going down further, so you can kind of compensate for it. And you'll hear it, just do it very light. I'm actually not even letting the full weight of this hit. I'm actually pulling back. But you can kind of hear the difference now. But you don't want to hit it hard because it will push past. That metal ring of the seal will squeeze enough to go past that stopping edge I was hitting with my fingernail. And then it'll get all crooked as you're going to hit the actual bearing. And then it's going to be almost impossible to get it perfectly set in there. And this, it's a little... Tap it down a little bit there. You really do not want to hit it hard. And then just take your finger and feel. See, I'm higher on this side than this side. Alright, so now it's good to go. So now we can go put it back on the vehicle and finish up the brakes. Alright, before you put your hub and everything back on, I like to wipe off the old grease that's left on the spindle here. You can see somebody was beating this to death too for absolutely no reason. Probably trying to get this to come loose from the back. Alright. Just take your rotor and hub. Be careful not to hit your seal in the back. And then once it gets in, push it up on there. Take your bearing, slide it in there. You got a little ring here that goes against your outer bearing, against its inner race. Clean that up a little bit. Alright. And you're going to put it in this way. There you go. Grab your first axle nut. You don't have to worry about cleaning this off too much unless it's got some trash on it, but alright. This is what you're going to want to do. Make sure you have your pin facing out. Set it in there. And get it to thread on. Now if you find it difficult to do it this way with your fingers, take it out, put it into your socket. Again, make sure the pin would be facing out, so into the socket here. Drop it in there, and then put it in. And just make sure it goes on smoothly. You shouldn't have to force it. If it's hanging up, it's probably trying to cross thread. Alright, so once it's threaded up on there, ratchet. Just pushing the new seal up onto the spindle, so it might be a little snug. Alright, once you get it down tight, what you want to really tighten down on it pretty much as hard as you can. You don't really have to worry about messing anything up, but there we go. Pretty much it's not going to even spin once you tighten it down. What that's doing is you're making sure that it's squeezing on those bearings and the races, and it'll make sure that those races are seated perfectly all the way around and all the way in. So pretty much as hard as you can get it, and then you're going to back it off a full turn. Alright, pretty much one full turn. Once you've loosened it a full turn, you want to take a torque wrench, set it up to 50 foot-pounds, and you're gonna torque this it and then spin it. Do it again, spin it a few times. Keep torquing it until it doesn't move anymore before it clicks. Alright. And once you do that, you're going to want to take it back off a quarter of a turn. So if you're flat here, you want to bring it up to here. And that's it. And right there. You can take your ring and you've got a notch here. It will only go in one place. Slide it in. Also, you want to make sure that your pin lines up with one of the holes on that washer, and it's kind of it can be difficult to do. Basically, you can put your two fingers in there and try to wiggle it. If it moves around pretty easily like that, it's not lined up, and you're gonna have to adjust that nut a little bit to get it. So if you're looking in this way, you can kind of see that it's right in between two. So you want to loosen it a little bit more. You don't want to tighten it back up. You may have to take your socket and do it by hand. Just take it, get it to lock into the nut, and then turn it a little bit. Not going to take much. And basically you want to move it you should be able to hold it up there and see which one you're closest to and loosen it to that one. If you go past it by accident, then obviously you can go back and snug it back up, which is what I did. There it goes, finally. So once you get it on there, you can just take this one
And this one is just there to hold the first one in place. Some people refer to it as a jam nut. It's kind of like on a tie rod. And this one doesn't matter which way it goes. So you're just going to take it and thread it on. So just run this one all the way in. Until it gets down there. And then you're just going to want to tighten it down as hard as you can. Pretty much. And leave it there. Because it's just to hold the other one in place, so it doesn't loosen up. You can take this, put on it. There you go. And still got free spin. And all you gotta do is take this, push it in there. Might again have to fight with it a little bit to get it to pop in there. So right now it's in the locked position. So we're going to put this arrow towards locked. Alright. And we'll go like this. Alright, you want to tighten these up pretty evenly. Try to go back and forth like you would a wheel. You don't want to go like in a circle or something like that. And you don't want to put them too tight either. They're just little screws. You do not want to break one of them off. Alright, now it's in the lock position, so make sure your axle's spinning back there, and then make sure your switch works. It says free, and there you go. And we're going to leave it there on free. Alright, so now you're almost done. Grab your piston here. Alright, so you're just going to, you can use any kind of tool for pressing in your piston. There's this kind of ratcheting kind. There's also a hand squeezing kind that has a spring on it. You can use a large C-clamp or a pair of large vice grips. If you use like a large vice grips or a C-clamp, what you're going to want to do is take one of your old pads and put in between, so you're putting even pressure across. Alright. And usually you want to take your bleeder loose before you press the piston back in. It will actually push the fluid out of there instead of pushing it back through the hydraulic system, especially if you have really dark fluid or old calipers and stuff, you don't really want to do that because it can get sediment in the bottom, and if you press it back through, it can actually stop up your line. I know these are new calipers that were put on last or 2 years ago, and the hoses and the brake fluid's good on it, so I wasn't too concerned about it on this one. But it also helps to do that if you're having trouble pressing it back. If it's really tight, you can break this loose. If you can't get it to move at all, and it's like you have a frozen caliper, if you take your bleeder loose and then you're able to press in the piston, then it's actually a restriction in your hose. If you take this loose and you're getting fluid out of it and you still can't press this in, then you have a frozen caliper. New brake pads. Alright, and I'm using on this is the Wagner Severe Duty Semi-Metallic. It says commercial disc brake pads. Semi-metallic will actually give you a better braking force and is less prone to fade. If ceramic pads get too hot, they can actually kind of melt and you lose a lot of your braking power at that point. So if you're concerned about braking power, especially if you're towing a trailer or something like that, I would suggest going with a semi-metallic. If you buy the really good kinds like this, you're less likely to worry about the squeak that you get sometimes from semi-metallic, and you may not have to worry about the dust as much, but you will still have the brake dust. That's one of the things with ceramic pads that a lot of people like, is that they don't emit a dark colored brake dust material, so you don't get that on your wheels and everything. But if you're more concerned about braking power, and if you're going to be under high braking situations, I definitely suggest a good set of semi-metallic pads. Did it not come with the clip? That's weird. Screw you too, Wagner. All that money, and you didn't even give me a new backing clip. It's all greasy and nasty now. So you may have to pop this off your old pad. And that goes on the one that goes in here. Alright. Now these actually move back and forth. They're supposed to. So, let's see if I can get these out. Nothing's gonna be easy today, is it? Alright, just slide it back in. And then I like to clean these up a little bit. If you got any rust on these or something, you can take a little bit of sandpaper or a wire brush
and clean it off so it can slide easily.
You don't have to tighten these back up crazy tight. That's about good. Alright, that's about it. And then you just put your wheel on, and the torque on these for the studs is about 92 pounds, I think is what the factory says. I usually do them to about 100, 110. I just like a little bit of extra on them, especially with the bigger tires and stuff like that. But other than that, don't forget to pump up your brakes before you take off. Make sure you got a good pedal before you put it in gear. Of course, doing the other side is exactly the same. I hope this helps somebody out. And most of the manual locking hubs are not this difficult. So this is probably the worst one I've ever done. And like I said, I'll probably be actually looking into getting different ones, considering how these are made. Just a real pain. So thank you everyone for watching. If you have any comments or ideas on a repair that you'd like to see, any comments on anything I can do better or explain better, just let me know in the comments, and see you later.